Um, I, as I met him 15 years ago, right at the beginning of the celebration of Larkin 25, the 25th anniversary of his death in 1985. And he produced a film which you'll see, the first film you'll see tonight, which we regarded, when I say we, the organisers of Larkin 25, as the kind of signature film for the whole festival. It lasted 6 months. It's a film of Here. But I can't leave my introduction, because I shall disappear soon, without mentioning that Dave's current role, which is creative director of a brilliant project in Hull called Curiosity. Just look it up. Just Google Curiosity Hull. It's a project designed to encourage, at one end, the use of libraries. It's funded by a trust fund which supports public libraries. But it goes beyond that. It has its ambition to create a city which is characterized by curiosity, and we're fortunate to have Dave leading that. He's been going much less than a year, so he's done an awful lot in a short time. There you are, Dave and Philip. That's my introduction. Enjoy yourselves this evening. It's a commemoration, of course, which sounds a bit glum, but we know how to turn commemorations into celebrations in Hull. So let's enjoy ourselves and relax. Okay, across to you, Phil.
Thanks very much, Graham. Well, good evening, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar names on board with us tonight, and some new people as well. So it's great that you could make it. I think Graham was being a bit over complimentary when he described me as a filmmaker with some skills in that department. I'm very much a learner, but I'm a great admirer of Dave Lee's work, and it's fantastic that Dave's joining us this evening. As Graham also said, I mean, Dave's worked with us over a number of years now, really, certainly starting with Larkin 25, and again in Larkin 100 to the centenary year. Dave was working with us and with Hull in conjunction with Hull Libraries, and that was fantastic end to the year. So it's really good that he's come along tonight to share these three films with us. Three films that also star another great Hull person, Tom Courtenay, who's an honorary vice president of the Larkin Society. And it's fantastic that we're going to hear Sir Tom Courtenay's interpretation, I suppose, of these three Larkin poems as part of this. So the plan is that we're going to show each of the three films. They'll actually be in chronological order in terms of when they were made. And after each film, they're only short films, and after each film, we're going to have a question answer with you to raise points that come out of those films. There are two ways that we can do this, actually. You could, when we finish the film, you could simply put your hand up, or use the little gesture on Zoom, the hand gesture to ask a question, or you could put it into chat. We'll pick them up anyway, whichever way you want to do that. So we're going to start with Here, which is I don't know, I would say it's probably one of Larkin's most loved poems, and certainly so evocative of Hull. So I think we'll watch that film first of all, and then we'll go over to Dave and pick up on some of the points that it raises.
Thanks, Phil. You have to excuse me, everybody. I'm not very au fait with Zoom. Hopefully this will work and there won't be any problems. Press that. 1 second. I think we're in. I keep forgetting which order to do. Here we go. And that one.
Swerving east, from rich industrial shadows and traffic all night north. Swerving through fields too thin and thistled to be called meadows, and now and then a harsh-named halt that shields workmen at dawn. swerving to solitude of skies and scarecrows, haystacks, hares and pheasants, and the widening river's slow presence, the piled gold clouds, the shining gull-marked mud, gathers to the surprise of a large town. Here domes and statues, spires and cranes cluster beside grain-scattered streets, barge-crowded water, and residents from raw estates brought down the dead straight miles by stealing flat-faced trolleys push through plate-glass swing doors to their desires. Cheap suits, red kitchenware, sharp shoes, iced lollies, electric mixers, toasters, washers, dryers. A cut-price crowd, urban yet simple, dwelling where only salesmen and relations come, within a terminate and fishy-smelling pastoral of ships up streets, the slave museum, tattoo shops, consulates, grim headscarved wives. And out beyond its mortgaged, half-built edges, fast-shadowed wheat fields running high as hedges isolate villages where removed lives loneliness clarifies. Here silence stands like heat. Here leaves unnoticed thicken, hidden weeds flower, neglected waters quicken. Luminously peopled air ascends, and past the poppy's bluish neutral distance ends the land suddenly beyond a beach of shapes and shingle. Here is unfenced existence, facing the sun, untalkative, out of reach.
Okay, that was here, as you saw. If you just give me a minute, Phil, I think it's worth explaining the kind of geography of what you saw in that film. When we first thought about doing it, I was working with a local actor, a guy called Matt Sutton, and we were talking about Larkin 25 and the upcoming programme. And he said somebody should do a film of here. And I didn't know the poem at all. And as soon as I read it, I thought, I know exactly where all those places are. I know exactly what Larkin's talking about. I know it's very strange for people who don't live in East Yorkshire, but the specificity in the geography in the poem is enormous. You can tell exactly where the journey is that he's taking at all times, from coming up on the train, on the train to Hull, turning off, coming through Hull and out to the coast, probably out back then it would have been Hornsey or Withensea, I guess he ends up. So I decided to try and, as far as I could, mirror that geography in the film. And I went out and recorded the locations and found places that appeared unchanged since the time Larkin wrote the poem. I wanted, as far as possible, to make all the shots, the geography as it was in the early 60s. And I think I just about managed to succeed in it. It's difficult in the middle of the town not getting modern things in. And I cheated slightly. Instead of going out to Withensea and Hornsey, which you can't do anymore, the train lines don't exist, I went to Spain. If you look at Yorkshire, Spain is the spit at the end of Yorkshire that goes out into the North Sea. It's about 4 miles long, a spit of land. And for me, and for a lot of people around here, it is the end of that poem. It's unfenced existence. It's exactly what Spain is. It's just, it hasn't changed since prehistory. It's an incredible place. So I decided to pick only locations within a mile of the north bank of the Humber. So it's basically everything underneath the A63, right across the north bank to Spain. And it's roughly in the exact order of the geography of that journey. So instead of going on the train, it could have been Larkin on his bike, starting off of an Egg Goal and coming across through Blacktoft and Gilberdike, Hull, and then out to Sunk Island and Spain beyond. And the places that you see are very much, they're all accessible by road, and they would all been accessible by Larkin. I used to go cycling out in those places back in the day. And I used to go out to Sunk Island and Gilberdike and places like that. So they're all places he would have experienced and seen when he was writing the poem. So that's the kind of idea of it, really. We were very fortunate to get Tom Courtenay to do it. It was very lovely of him to do it. And I think his read was brilliant. And then mixed it. I got a local audio artist whose name escapes me. She's on the end of the next film. I'll remember it then, obviously, when I see her name, to do as a kind of audio montage. And then we shot and edited everything to that. It took about, I think we made it in total in about 5-6 weeks. And then it was shown as the opening project of Larkin 25. It was shown to the press to launch the programme. We'll put it on the cinema in Hull, and it launched the programme. So that's the kind of short, brief history of it. Does anyone who want to ask anything about it? No, not at this stage. Sorry, go on.
Dave? Can you hear me?
I can.
I'm Simon. I'm a trustee.
Hi, Simon.
I thought that was great, and beautifully read by Tom Courtenay, wasn't it? Can you answer me one question? What is the Welwick relic that we saw a sign of in the last minute or two?
It's fabulous, isn't it? It's absolutely amazing. It's a little bit of a sad story, really. Welwick is a little village out on the road to Spain. It's actually two of the gunpowder plotters came from Welwick. So two of the people who worked with Guy Fawkes on the blowing up Parliament came from Welwick, from this little farming village out past Hull on the road to Spain. It's kind of where the Welwick relic was on a bend. And I just saw it and thought, that's fantastic. It's got to go in, you know.
Yeah.
It's a guy called Bernard Blashill owned the farm. He sold the farm off in parts and he ended up with a little bit of farmland and a farmhouse. In the little bit of farm he had left, he had some outbuildings, and he turned his hand to metalwork. And he used to make sculptures. And once a year they'd have the Welwick show and people could go in and look at his sculptures. The Welwick relic was the big one outside that kind of drew people in. He did a lot of them kind of whirly-giggy things, them kind of air-driven stuff, but all sorts of sculptures. He let us we took a little, we had about 8-foot crane arm that sat on top of the tripod. So I got a bit of height so we could get up to it and then come down. And he let us stand on his drive and film it. I had a good chat with him. He was very interested. Sadly, he passed away a few months later. He was within the frame of that shot. He was hit by a car and killed very sadly. Before I'd finished the film. So on a different cut of the film, there is a dedication to him at the end. And I went and dropped a coffee off to his wife a few months later, and she was very touched. So it's a real shame because there's something about that felt unique and interesting. And it kind of speaks of that hinterland out past Hull. When you go from Hull through Sunk Island to Spain, it's flat, unusual agricultural land. The closest, I guess, it's like the Fenland in Lancashire. And
Well, Lincolnshire.
It's got a whimsy. I don't know if you agree, Sam. It's got a whimsy. It's got an oddness to it that really kind of suits poetic imagery. So I shot a lot of stuff out there on the way to Spain. There's a shot towards the beginning where you saw it's just a gate sat there with nothing around it. Gate nowhere. And again, it's just something very odd. I spotted it on the recce and I thought, I'll shoot it. I don't know if it'll fit. But it's kind of like this isolation and oddness to it. And excuse me, I was very wary of, towards the end where he talks about luminously peopled air, which I've always, and you're far better brains on this, I might be wrong, I've always assumed was him talking about a seaside resort, Hornsea, with that kind of luminously peopled, colourful, kind of a lot going on. And because I was going to Spain and there's nothing there, I wanted to give a flavour of that on the way. So that's why I kind of put that whirligig in, to give that luminously peopled kind of bit of adventure to it, to hint at that, which is just a few seconds further on.
Great.
Did that answer your question, by the way?
It does, yeah, and certainly suited the mood of the film and of the poem. I found that interesting. Thank you.
I just thought it was such an odd thing to see. I just thought if I can squeeze that, there's a lot of stuff we shot and didn't put in, and if it hadn't have worked, I wouldn't have put it in. But it just sat beautifully. I thought there's a few hands up. I'm sorry if I'm going in the wrong order, but I'm going to go on my screen left to right. Joe, I think you got a question, Joe?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for that. I've only recently joined the society, and I'm really glad to be a member. I didn't realise there was one till I sort of came across it. So yeah, I'm Hull born and bred. So that journey for me was amazingly filmed, and the poem is so evocative. And I remember getting that train to Witheransea. I thought, I mean, this isn't really a question, it's just really a comment that I thought from my remembrances, that really captured how it was, and
another reason I should point out, thanks very much. Another reason why I kind of cheated and went to Spain was the journey out to Wyth and to Hornsey kind of clips the bit of the walls and the landscape starts getting hilly, and I wanted everything dead flat. I just thought it suited it better to be absolutely flat everywhere. So that's another reason why I cheated. But it must be odd, Joe. I don't know if you found this. I can't really understand how people who don't know the area relate to the poem, because it's so specifically this geography. I think there are obviously similar geographies other places, but it's so specifically Hull. It seems strange to me when other people love the poem, So again, that's not really, that's just a comment. People do love the poem, but I don't know how they can love it when it's so specifically about this place, Wiser heads than me will know. Adam, you've got a hand up, please.
Yes, I have kind of I don't know if it's a cinematography question or an editing question. There seems to be a kind of saturation of yellow, almost gold, throughout a lot of the natural areas of the film. I'm wondering if that's deliberate or not.
Yeah, I'll have to apologize. The quality of that film isn't very good. Unfortunately, it was made when we were mainly when compression was in its fairly early days. We're talking about 12, 30, 14 years ago. And the only version I've got of it is heavily compressed. You can go and look at it on YouTube, and it's a much better HD quality on there, which will get rid of some of the pixelation and blocking that was in there. Apologies for that. I didn't know how well it'll play until we actually played it. Yeah, the saturation was something. I worked with an editor on it, and I kind of left him to it. And after I'd shot and worked and done the read and put everything together, I kind of walked away from it for a couple of weeks and left it with the editor. He knew roughly what I wanted. And when I came back, he'd put all the colour effects on. I was kind of going to go with one colour grade throughout. I can't there was a steely blue that's in there a few times. It looks great on the landscape. And some of it had really punched a lot of colour through it, to the point where the colours were almost bleeding. And you're right, the yellow stuff is the strongest stuff. We shot quite a lot of stuff directly into the sun. Because of the camera and the lens we were working with, it gave us a really interesting effect with a lot of it. And I think he found that you got a very nice abstract effect if you punch the yellow up even further. So those shots that are there, they're meant to give an impression of, as the whole thing is, an impression of what the words are about. When he's talking about thin and thistled meadows, you see fields and you see them kind of very bright kind of yellowy shots. And it was about, again, you're not always facing in the most suitable direction to see things. Sometimes you do see things and you've got to shield your eyes and you can't see properly. And I thought I'll leave him in. I won't question him. It was his decision. He liked them. And maybe not to everybody's taste, but I didn't mind them. I just thought it was an interesting effect. So we left some of them in. But please do, later on, go and check it out on YouTube. You'll be able to see a much better defined version of it on there. Is that all right, Adam?
Well, thank you.
Thank you. David, you've got a hand up.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Dave. That was lovely film. I loved that. And one thing I just I think it's funny because Spurn, we're down in Gloucestershire. Me and my wife came up to for the for when Simon Armitage gave a talk at the Society, and we went to Spurn. I thought it was an incredible place, and funny enough, we were going to hire. We tried to hire bikes there to cycle down to the end, and they said, "Oh, you can't, you won't get there. You know, it's too sandy, you won't be able to cycle. You have to push them." And I think it's funny because Larkin, of course, is on his own old bone rattler bike, and he used to cycle there from Hull, I think, all the way.
I should probably explain. The spit breached about 10 years ago and destroyed the road. You used to be able to drive to the very point, all 4 miles down, and you could drive. When we made the film, we could drive to the very end. There's a lighthouse there. There's some old wartime bunkers and stuff. You can still walk down, but it's hard. It's a good slog. Yeah. And they've now started doing adventure tours where you go in one of these big kind of Humvee things, people carriers, and they take you down to the bottom. But only a short time ago, a decade ago, you could drive to the very bottom. And then the sea overtopped one night and took the road away completely. So you probably came after that happened. Cycling now is completely out the window. You see people riding horses down there. Horse riding down there has become popular. Most people walk, and then I think it costs about 20 quid, and you go down. The good thing is they've reopened the lighthouse, which wasn't open then. So if you take the adventure tour, you can go down and go up the lighthouse, which is fantastic. You know, it's really, really good. But yeah, it's a shame. It's my favourite place on earth is Spain. I've been going all my life, and I used to take the kids every year. We'd go and have a pilgrimage out there, and the year it overtopped, we couldn't. It was too. They were, bless them, they were like 5 and 8, and it was too much for them. It's such a long walk and such hard work through the sand. So unfortunately, it's less accessible than it was 10 years ago. But that's the nature of Spain. Nature wins every time. You know, so you can't tame it.
Yeah. I did wonder
sorry.
with Larkin being not that fit then. I thought maybe he was like, you know, super
No,
fit.
it's flatness. It's the flatness. He could have got so far and stopped for a pint and a sandwich, and then carried on the bike, because luckily it's very flat. And the road was laid by the army. It wasn't a proper tarmac road or anything. It was one of those that was made of, I don't know what they're called, but laid by the army. And it had moved. There is a tarmac road there from the Second World War when they were taking heavy artillery down there, because it was obviously a main artillery point for the army and the RAF. Just a little bit further up at Kilnsey. Kilnsey is the last village before Spain. It's kind of at the top of Spain. Kilnsey, there's a sound mirror at Kilnsey, and we found out that, what's he called? Lord of the Rings fella. Tolkien. Tolkien used to look after that sound mirror during the war. When he came back and he had shell shock, they gave him light duties. He stayed on Cot Road, I think, didn't he, Graham, in the hospital there? They put him on light duties and they put him in charge of the sound mirror at Kilnsey. So not only was Larkin cycling around there, Tolkien used to look after the sound mirror. So it's quite a place, is Kilnsey, in its own way. 2 great characters there. I should just say, I know we want to move on. There's a nice little story from when we premiered the film. I went down to the local multiplex and asked them if we could borrow a screen for the day, and we invited the press down, and Graham was going to use it to launch the programme and get the papers in and all that kind of stuff. And just before it was all supposed to be happening, I had a little job. It sounds very glamorous, but it wasn't. I had to fly out to Cannes to shoot a thing with Julia Bradbury, a travel thing. And we were supposed to be in, shoot for the day and come out. And we went in and we shot with Julia, and Julia got out that night. She had to be back in London. We got up the next morning to come home so that I could come to the Larkin premiere, and the Icelandic volcano exploded. So we woke up in Cannes to the news that we weren't going anywhere. We were trapped. It was hellish. We were trapped in the south of France for 11 days. That we couldn't get out. We couldn't get a car or a train or a bike or anything. I did hire a bike, actually. I hired a bike to cycle around Cannes for a day or so. But we had 11 days out there. And so I ended up doing some of the press back home on the phone, which was quite glamorous. I was, speaking to radio stations and said, no, I'm in Cannes at the moment. I sounded quite posh, but I was only there because I couldn't get home at all, But yeah, 11 days we were stuck out there, and I missed the entire shebang, unfortunately. So There we go. That was here. I don't know any more, or should we move on to the second film? Is everybody ready to move on to the second film? Yeah, I'm getting a lot of nods. That's fantastic. Sorry, Phil, I'm taking over. Did you want to say anything? Now, am I all right?
I was going to say first of all that I think you're right to end that film at Spurn, because it is very much in Larkin's mind. I think the Larkin Trail. I think it's the final marker on the Larkin Trail is at Spurn, so that's where you end up if you do the whole of the Larkin Trail. I think it's still there, Graham, isn't it? I don't think it's been washed away or anything.
Yeah, no, it's still there. Yep.
And he also describes it very similar ways to that poem in his foreword to A Rumoured City, that anthology of Hull poetry that came out towards the end of Larkin's life. So I think you're absolutely right to finish it there. Just picking up on a couple of the comments too that people have made on chat.
Oh, sorry, I've not got the chat open. I do apologise.
Interesting. I mean, people have picked up on this great mix of word, sound, and imagery that film produces. Just going back, Robert says wonderfully evocative images to accompany the poem, and Joe, just a perfect mix of visual and audio, so atmospheric. I think that's what you've captured so well there. Of course, Sir Tom Courtenay's voice, that reading is wonderful, isn't it? I think from the very first time that I saw that film, Tom Courtenay's voice took over from Betjeman's, for example, in his reading of the film, of the poem in the BBC Monitor programme from '64, and even Larkin's, I think, it just reads it so well.
I was absolutely delighted when he said he'd do it, and we didn't work that long. I think we only did 3 reads. I met him in London. We recorded in Soho. I met him at Bar Italia, and we had coffee and a couple of cannolis and talked about the poem, and then went to do the read. And it was lovely. It was a lovely moment. I think he'd done the second one, and I nipped into the booth. I was in the recording room, and he was in the booth. I nipped into the booth, and I was very wary. This is Tom Courtenay, and I'm just some oik from Hull. And I just said, Tom, this line here, right, what do you think about this? And it was great. He touched my arm and he went, that's an excellent note. And I suddenly let my hair stood up because I thought he's had notes off David Lee and John Schlesinger. And suddenly he thinks I've given him a good note. I was kind of like, I'm in with that crowd now. It was fantastic. But I prefer his read to the other ones. They're absolutely right. Although we did get told off. We showed it as part of Larkin 25, and somebody from the Larkin Society said that he got it wrong. Said that he got the poppies bluish distance, neutral distance wrong. And we got into a little contretemps about it. And then whoever it was I was arguing, I wasn't arguing, we were discussing. Whoever we were discussing it with agreed that Larkin should have put a comma in, and that would have cleared it up. There's a comma missing in the last part that would have helped Tom. And I said, come on, it's Tom. You can't blame Tom for getting it wrong, you know. So there is, but every time I hear that, I think of that conversation. I wish we'd done it another way, but there you go.
Well, I thought that as well. But then again, I think in every reading of that poem, you keep thinking you should have put a comma after that.
Absolutely, yeah. If you read it with a comma, it makes much more sense. I think if we could reanimate Larkin, I think he'd admit that mistake himself, you know. I probably wouldn't, the miserable old bugger, would he?
Shall we move on to the second film then?
I will, yeah. Sorry, Phil, go on.
I was just going to say this probably is my favourite for various reasons. I think partly because I don't think we're going to be watching Dave's film for Bridge for the Living. It's not, I don't think, seen as one of Larkin's best poems, and certainly one he struggled to write. It was a commissioned poem, of course, for the opening of the Humber Bridge. But I think your film adds an awful lot to that poem. A lot of Larkin's poems seem to be quite filmic, and this one is another one. Here certainly is. It's my favourite of the films anyway. So
thank you very much.
That one. Pick up the chat after that.
We did this for Humber Mouth because it was the 40th anniversary of the opening of the bridge, I think, the year we made it. So we got a little bit of money from Humber Mouth to make it. I should explain, the budget was a lot less on this, which is why the production values aren't quite as slick. But I used that as a positive. And what I decided to do was, in the first film, we had a lot of movement, a lot of camera movement on tracks and stuff like that. I just couldn't afford it. So I decided to do the whole film handheld, as if So it's very frames. There's not much movement in the frame. The frame doesn't move. There's movement within the frame, but the frame doesn't move. And I did it handheld, kind of imitating Larkin as if he was stood with his camera, with his stills camera. I thought I'll try and give Larkin's eyes to everything we see, and that would have been through a still locked off camera. So I thought make a positive of a lack of budget and do that. So again, apologies. I'll just have to. This is bridge for that, and I've got to say I struggled with it as well as Larkin did. I struggled with it, but we'll come on to that in a second. It should be there. 1 second. Here we go.
Isolate city spread alongside water. Posted with white towers, she keeps her face half turned to Europe, lonely northern daughter, holding through centuries her separate place. Behind her domes and cranes, enormous skies of gold and shadows build, a filigree of wharves and wires, ricks and refineries. A working skyline wanders to the sea. In her remote three-cornered hinterland, long white-flowered lanes follow the riverside. The hills bend slowly seaward, plain gulls stand. Sharp fox and brilliant pheasant walk, and wide, wind-muscled wheat fields wash round villages, their churches half submerged in leaf. They lie drowned in high summer, cartways and cottages, the soft huge haze of ash-blue sea close by. Snow-thickened winter days are yet more still. Farms fold in fields, their single lamps come on. Tall church towers parley, airily audible. Howden and Beverley, Heddon and Patrington. While scattered on steep seas, ice-crusted ships, like errant birds, carry her loneliness. A lighted memory, no miles eclipse, a harbour for the heart against distress. And now, this stride into our solitude, a swallow fall and rise of one plain line, a giant step forever to include all our dear landscape in a new design. The winds play on it like a harp. The song, sharp from the east, sun-throated from the west, will never to one separate shire belong, but north and south make union manifest. Lost centuries of local lives that rose and flowered to fall short where they began, seem now to reassemble and unclose, all resurrected in this single span. Reaching for the world, as our lives do, as all lives do, reaching that we may give the best of what we are and hold as true. Always, it is by bridges that we live.
That was Bridge for the Living. I think, as Phil says, it's a commission for Larkin, and he struggled with it, and he spent, as I understand it, several years writing it. And because the bridge kept getting delayed, he had longer and longer to tinker with it. But I think some of it feels quite forced. I think it's got some beautiful lines in it, but some of it feels like you can feel the money. You can feel he's writing for the money, I think, or he must have felt the pressure from the people commissioning him to write in a certain way. I don't know if that's how anybody else feels, but that's how I felt of it. And I kind of tried to mirror that in some of the imagery and the cutting. There's quite jagged edges in the music. It was Louise Bennett who did the sound. And I said to her, can you make it a bit more angular this time, a bit more unsettled? Because I think he did feel unsettled writing it, and I think that comes across. Another great read from Tom again, though. And when Louise gave him the music, the audio, I didn't give her any brief beyond make it jagged. She gave me that long intro, about 20 seconds of like radio tuning in and stuff. So I decided to use that to lay down some imagery of the area, the places that Larkin talks about around East Yorkshire, and to kind of, again, only use places that would have been around, in this case, in the early 70s before the bridge came along, and try and get an idea of that's what East Yorkshire's like before it's joined up, the agriculture and the industry that was here before this big monolith came. And then obviously halfway through the poem, it is just about the bridge. It's about this line of communication to everywhere else. Yeah, it's a good one. I like it. I prefer here, but I won't fall out with you, Phil. We won't argue about it. You can like it. Anybody any questions on this one? I will look at the chat this time. Apologies earlier to chat people. Anybody? Graham, go on.
I agree with you that the poem feels forced at times, but I have to say that the film and the reading, they unloosen all of that. They kind of take away, to me, primarily the stiffness of it and the formulaic aspect of it, because he uses quite a few images that he's used elsewhere. But I think the reading, when Tom reads that stanza about the fishermen, the ice on the boats and the harbour against distress, it feels to me if he puts a level of feeling into that, which is extraordinary. That comes from the first half. Of course, the second half, when it becomes more euphoric, he changes tone, and you can tell that. But in that first half, that stanza on the harbour
Harbour for the heart against distress. It's lovely, yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and it means so much to him because that's where he was brought up.
Yeah.
The very streets, yeah.
We couldn't initially, I should say, get permission to film at the top of the bridge. They wouldn't do it. I was asking for about 2 months. Sorry, Robert's just said on the chat, he said that the bridge connects East Yorkshire to everywhere else. However, we're somewhere living on the other side. It links isolation to isolation. Yes, Robert, it does. So I can't disagree with you. Lincolnshire feels, if anything, even more isolate than up here sometimes. We couldn't get permission to go to the top of the bridge. The bridge master just said they don't allow people up there. They got too many requests, and it was a flat no. And I thought that's a bit miserable and a bit tight, you know. This was a poem that was written for the bridge, and this is Humber Mouth, Larkin Society. It was a favour, and it was flat no. And luckily, unbelievably, Top Gear came to the rescue. There's a local chap called Graham Bonus who decided one day to walk across the bottom of the Humber. So he bought a diving suit with heavy boots and a big bell helmet and walked across the Humber, which you can do. He did it, so clearly you can do it, across the mudbanks. Top Gear found out and said, well, you do that and we'll race you around. And they shot some footage of Graham from the top of the bridge. So I emailed the bridge and said, well, you've let the BBC up. If you're going to let the BBC and Jeremy Clarkson up, it's not going to look good when I tell the papers and the radio that you won't let us up, some local people. And he crumbled and let us up. So it was fantastic because that footage at the top really it's wonderful. And for somebody, I was brought up in Ezel. So I saw the bridge being built. I saw the difference every day. I saw the little spinny thing going there and back for months. I saw the box section nearly fall into the river. So to get to the top of there is like a great thing for somebody like me. the odd thing is, when I don't know if any of you has ever been up the bridge, there's a tiny elevator in one of the towers and it only fits 2 people in. It's very claustrophobic. If it gets stuck, I don't know what happens. Think about it. So just the 2 of us went up. The weird thing when you get to the top, the view is incredible, as you can imagine. Apparently on a good day, it was a little bit hazy the day we were there. You can see as far as Lincoln Cathedral, which is incredible. It's 50 mile away, or 40 odd mile away. The oddest thing is when you're up there, the only place you can't see is Hull, because you don't go right to the top. You go to the crossbeam and the tower's blocking your view of Hull. So it's very odd to go all that way up and not being able to see the city it saves. I did manage to sneak a couple around the thingy and get a couple of shots, but it was very odd. And it was good that it did eventually let us up there, because I think it makes the film. I think without that, it would have been a handful. There's a good half of the poem, a good chunk of the poem needs filling with bridge shots. And if I hadn't have got up there, it would have been ones from the ground and it would have got too samey. So I'm glad on a personal level I went up. And for the sake of the film, I went up.
They let the poet laureate up there, Dave, in 2022. I'm sure some people here will have heard the Larkin Revisited radio programs that Simon Armitage did. Bridge for the Living was one of the poems that he chose. And he ended up inside the superstructure of that one, I think, because he was playing with the echoes inside.
He took me in there as well. I went in there as well. I went in the road section, the box sections, which are all hollow inside. It was amazing. He said we went in, there was just the tiniest bit of light coming in through the hatch. And he said, look that way. And he pointed straight down. And he turned the switch and the lights in every box section came on one after the other. Ka-chung, ka-chung, ka-chung. And it was the most amazing sight. And I said, let me get a camera set up. I want to get that. And it wouldn't do it again. Because once it's turned on and warmed up, it has to be left for a day or so before it'll do it again. So this amazing sight, I don't know if I'd have used it, but I just wanted it on film. I wish he'd told me before he actually did it. And he took me down in the anchorage as well, which is where for those who don't know, the main cable of the bridge is made of thousands of small cables, about that big. And they all go into the bottom part of the bridge and they're all glued into concrete. And the anchorage is a big chamber and they all come in, thousands of them come in, which is where Simon Armitage will have gone. And I believe, Graham, Phil, you might know this, they did actually have the music and Larkin's poem played in there once. There was a chamber orchestra or something, an invited audience, went inside the anchorage and it was played there. Is that right?
I tried to persuade them to do that, but I'm not sure that they did.
Oh, it didn't happen, right? Okay.
Well, I wasn't there, but I mean, it's like a cathedral, isn't it? It's a massive.
It's incredible. It's beautiful. It's not the easiest place to get in and out of, but it is. I'm glad I've seen it. It's absolutely remarkable. I think as well, I should say, they've become a lot more generous with letting people go up the bridge over the past few years. There's been a lot more people go up. It was maybe the way I approached them. I maybe went in 2-footed like I normally do. And so I put their backs up before we started. But they are a lot nicer now than they used to be.
One of the questions that Simon Armitage raised in that programme, which I think is applicable to this poem and to here, is whether you could relate to it if you were living in Hull or you visited Hull now. And he interviewed Vicky Foster on that programme, who's a Hull poet. And she said very much that Hull still has that feeling to it of isolation, etc. Is that your view, Dave, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're still end of the line without a shadow of a doubt. I went to London end of last week for the first time since before COVID. I've not been to London for 4 or 5 years, and it just reinforced that we are just stuck out on a limb. You know, as much as we try and make friends with people that don't seem to want to know, you know. But there you go, we're happy. We're happy with our little lot stuck out here. We'll just entertain ourselves, you know. We don't care. Shall we move on to the last film? We've not got long left. Is that all right?
Yeah. So going to This Be the Verse, which is probably the most well-known Larkin poem. I don't think you can go a day without something. If you do that sort of Google search for Larkin, something comes up every day. Somebody's referred to that poem either by its name or some other way. Larkin predicted that poem would be recited by 1,000 girl guides before he died. He didn't predict that Dave Lee might do a film on it though. That's what you did, Dave, and it's a great film. It was 2014, of course, and I think it was funded through Larkin 25 as well, wasn't it?
It was for the Arts Trust, yeah.
Yeah.
And what I did with Tom after we'd done the first film, I said, if I have ideas in future, Tom, would you be interested in doing more? And he said, yeah. And after we'd done Bridge for the Living, he said, why don't we have a go at this bit of verse? And I said, well, I need an idea. We need an idea, Tom. We need something to make it work. And it took me a few weeks thinking about it. And then I come up with the idea of the conceit of the film, which I think the poem isn't aimed at adults. I think it's aimed at kids. I think it's laden with irony all the way through. And so I thought the idea of putting an old man's voice into the mouths of young kids to give a warning to adults and young kids about growing old. I had several self-referential loops in there. So that was the idea with the film, which Tom loved. And I think it works. I think as a concept, it's good. And we'll see what people think. Should I put it on?
Yeah.
1 second. I'm getting used to this now. I think I can do it. There we go.
They fuck you up, your mum and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had, and add some extra, just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn, by fools in old-style hats and coats, who half the time wear soppy stern, and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can. And don't have any kids yourself.
That was this bit of verse. The Hull people will know that some of those shots were in Pearson Park, which is a few feet from where Larkin lived and where, I don't know if he was living there when he wrote the poem, was he? I don't think he was he? It was earlier. But anyway, it was right near Larkin's flat in Pearson Park, some of the locations. All the kids came from Wyke Sixth Form. One of them, the tall ginger kid, has since become an actor. He acts in stuff now. So that was the first thing he'd done, and he got right into it. So I think as a concept, it works. It's gone down very well. It's gone down very well, weirdly, in California. It got shown at 2 film festivals in California with a few weeks apart. One in San Diego, one of the Sands, and the other one at Oakland. I got little laurels from the film festivals, and there was some great comments came back from those. So it's weird to have a gang of Hull kids reading Larkin, which Courtenay's voice, going down well in with all the hippies in California. It's fantastic. But he got a good response. Any questions on that one? Let's have a look. Nothing on the chat. We've got no hands up. No? Okay. We did. Sorry, Joe, go on.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. I think it's quite a difficult poem to hear sometimes. I'm just want to know really what gave you the inspiration for doing it that way, which is something that would never have crossed my mind, but then I'm not.
It was reading it, Joe, and thinking, how do I? Whenever I do a film of a poem, I try and not. It's like the old doctor's thing, do no harm. I don't want to do something that doesn't suit the thing. And it's always difficult because you're taking it into a different medium and you're taking something that isn't meant to be filmed and interpreted to an extent, and doing that and forcing a visual style and a look and everything else on it. But in the end, when I thought of the idea of the kids reading with Courtenay's voice, that's when I thought, no, that's worth exploring. That's worth doing. That I think is intriguing. And I think it is. I think the original poem is aimed at kids and not adults. And I think he's being ironic. I don't think he's being serious. I think that, again, it makes you think about that when you see the kids reading with Courtenay's voice. Courtenay was very pleased with it. He really liked it. I should say as well, I meant to mention earlier, when we went to record the read for this one, we actually did it in Hull, the read for that one. Courtenay was up visiting at the time, visiting his sister. And he told me that he'd just been spending some time with Alan Plater, the great Hull playwright. And he asked me for another copy of a DVD of Here, because he'd gone around to see Alan Plater, and he'd been showing him Here. Plater was on his deathbed, and they were talking about Hull and reminiscing about the old days, and he'd left the DVD with him. So it was lovely to think that one of the last things that Alan Plater, the great Alan Plater, watched was that film of Here, and enjoyed it and sat with Courtenay to watch it. You know, it was fantastic. Any other questions on that one? No.
Can I ask what the sixth formers got out of it? I mean, what were their reaction to it? I mean, how easy was it to sell?
It was very difficult. I struggled for a few weeks to get I had to go to schools and I had to go to sixth forms and explain what I was trying to do. And then I was very lucky. I think he's called Ed Gruker. He's called something, Chris Gruker over at Wyke. He's the drama teacher, and he was very enthusiastic about the idea. So he sold it to the pupils. I went and sat with them and explained what I wanted to do. And the reaction was a mixture of bafflement and, yeah, let's do it, you know. And I gave them all a version of the read, just Courtenay, and I gave it with a click track. And some of them, when we played it back, I just played it on a portable MP3 player. And some of them wanted it with a click track so they could kind of keep time with it. And some of them wanted it just the read. And I wanted somebody to be able to go right through the full poem and lip sync perfectly, and nobody could. The most I got was the odd couplet. But I think, you know, for the most part, it worked. And they really enjoyed it. The kids all enjoyed it. The vast majority of them had never read the poem before. So Chris made it a point of including it in the lessons at school. So a lot of them learned about that. I had to get permission off the parents because of the word fuck. So we had to get signed off by the parents from everybody. But no, they enjoyed it. And I think they learned more about Larkin, and they learned more about that poem from it, you know. I did, before we left Courtenay that time, we discussed whether or not we'd do any more films in the future, because we'd done the 3. And we said about trying to come up with some sort of idea for Wits and Weddings, which I've explored with Graham and I explored with Phil, and we tried to make work a couple of years ago for Larkin 100. And Courtenay was very keen on doing Wits and Weddings, which I think would have been fantastic. And unfortunately, we just couldn't make it work, which is a real shame. Courtenay wanted to do church going. I couldn't sell the concept I had of Wits and Weddings to Courtenay. He wasn't convinced by it. And he suggested church going. And unfortunately, I wasn't convinced by that. I hated saying no to him, but I just couldn't find a way into the poem that wasn't just going and filming a church. So we kind of stalled on that. I'm hoping to get back together with him at some point and try and come up with another film to work on, another read, because it's been 10 years now since we made those, and it'd be good to get 1 or 2 more in before one of us dies. I'm not saying who's more likely to go, because it could well be.
It'd be great to hear Tom Courtenay reading Church Going, I think, or any other Larkin poems. So,
well, I did consider just getting the reads. I did think, shall I just go in the studio and we'll get the reads? But I think Tom, quite rightly, unless he's an artist, and if he isn't sold on the project, he doesn't want to do it half-heartedly, you know. So we haven't recorded the reads. It's up to me to convince him, really, which I'd love to do if I can one day. But yeah, it's a shame we've never done any more. But those 3 I'm really proud of. They've been a kind of calling card. And there's new comments arriving every day on YouTube and all over the place. People from all over the world discovering them, and I'm pleased to say that this bit of verse. One of the things I said when they gave me the Arts Award was there were some bloody horrible versions of it on YouTube, really sickly, mainly from America. I'm sorry, somebody's American here tonight, and I do apologise. Mainly American. Is it Adam? I do apologise. But they just don't seem to get it at all. They don't get what it's about. And they just do these horrible Instagram-y versions of it. So I'm pleased that it's high up in the listings on YouTube. So at least we get a version that's kind of sanctioned by the Larkin Society and people like that of his, what's probably his best known poem.
Well, we also say, Dave, that you also made some fantastic films featuring other poets, in particular from Hull. Hull's, I think he described himself as being the fourth best poet in Hull, Dean Wilson. I've done a lot of films with Dean. They're not. I've got to say, if you like Larkin stuff, I don't know how much you'll like Dean's. Dean's is much more humorous, or they're either humorous or they're absolutely filthy. He's kind of our version of Cooper Clarke or Pam Ayres or somebody like that, and both of those are very valid when talking about Dean. He's kind of a mixture of the two. He's Dean. I've done about 60 films with Dean now. I love making with Dean. We just nip out now and again when we have an idea and go and shoot it, and we usually put it on Twitter. Yeah, but again, though, it's the same landscape, isn't it? You're featuring the landscape that Larkin.
Absolutely. Well, Dean used to work under Larkin. Dean worked in the post room at the university when he had a YTS back in the 80s, and he was terrified of Larkin. He wanted to go and show him his poetry, but he'd hide around the corner whenever he saw him. And he used to have to go and deliver letters to Larkin's office on a daily basis, and he'd run in and drop them and run out again. He was absolutely petrified of him, was Dean. But yeah, we do shoot them all in around this area, and we tend to use a lot of the same spaces that Larkin would have occupied. I want to say, actually, I've just found out recently there's quite a famous picture of Larkin on Hesel Foreshore, sat on a big tree stump, a big old branch that's watched up. And when I saw the photograph, I used to play on that tree when I was little. When we used to go down Hesel Foreshore, that tree was there for years, and we used to play on it and run around it and lark on it. And then I saw a picture of him the other week with him on it. It was like, bloody hell, I remember that tree, Anyway, that's apropos of nothing. I do apologise. But yeah, I also made a film of The City Speaks by Shane Rhodes, which opened Hull City of Culture Year. It was shown as part of the opening ceremony. And I've gone from somebody without much interest in poetry, I've got to say, doing the Larkin films opened up poetry to me, not just Larkin, but the people. And now I've got a much greater appreciation, and I'm really pleased when poets come to me and we do projects together. I think I've done 5 or 6 different poets now. Yeah. And I really, really enjoy it. And I'm glad that they trust their work with me. That's really important,
Well, they're fantastic films, and you can find them all easily online, can't you, Dave? You've got your own website, for example.
I've got a website, davelee.net, or they're all there on YouTube. You just type in the name of the poem and they come up towards the top of the rankings.
And we'll put a link on when we put it up on YouTube so people can follow this up, because they're well worth looking at. Fantastic films. So I think we're probably just about there, unless anybody's got any final questions before I hand over to Graham.
But I wondered if, David, in the last couple of minutes, whether you'd like to say anything to our colleagues about the project you're involved with at the moment, as I mentioned.
Yeah, just very briefly, I'd appreciate anybody looking at it and giving you a viewpoint and joining in with it. It's 100 years since James Reckitt died, and the James Reckitt Library Trust have looked at their remit to increase the provision of public libraries in Hull and said, are we achieving that goal? And what we've decided, they've hired me as creative director, which I'm very pleased about, is that we need to get on people's screens. We need to get on their phones, their tablets, their computers. And so we've launched a project called Curiosity Hall, which isn't just about screens, it's about more than that, primarily for people in locations elsewhere. You'll find us on Curiosity Hull, and Curiosity Hull on all the main social media feeds. And we post new content every day about various things. And the idea is to get people to engage with public libraries in Hull. But hopefully, people will find the content fascinating in their own way anyway. We do cover more questions than just Hull. So please have a look, curiosityhull.co.uk or Curiosity Hull on all the major social networks. Thanks very much. I've really enjoyed this, by the way. Thanks to you all.
Well, thank you, Phil, and thank you, Dave, for what I'm seeing coming up through the chat pages. People have described it as a very enjoyable hour. And
thank you, everybody on the chat.
It's gone very quickly, and there's absolutely no loss of momentum all the way through. It was fascinating. So thank you, everybody, for coming and joining us, and on this important day in Larkin's calendar. And thank you for all your contributions. It's been a very, very nice way to spend Monday evening.